Hello, friends and colleagues from around the world. Welcome to the first World Day for Glaciers, the 21st of March, 2025, to be repeated every day going forward on this vernal equinox. The planning today is to think toward the fifth International Polar Year in 2032 to 2033. This webinar is hosted by the Next Generation Science Diplomat Committee with the thematic network on science diplomacy through the University of the Arctic. My name is Professor Paul Arthur Berkman, and I have the pleasure to open this, but the webinar itself will be moderated and hosted by the Next Generation Science Diplomat Committee, starting with Dr. Alexandra Middleton. On this on this first day of World Day for Glaciers, it's important to take a perspective of the world. And this is perspective that I've used many years with Antarctica at the bottom and the North Pole at the top. And if we look at the world on a planetary scale, about 70% of the Earth system falls beyond the boundaries of nations, collectively defined in terms of international spaces. This includes the high seas and the deep sea, as well as Antarctica and outer space, formally defined as international spaces under international law. The other 30% of the Earth's surface is within the boundaries of nations, collectively characterized in terms of national interests. And today, in celebrating the first World Day for Glaciers, it's important to reflect that we live on a single planet together, all 8 billion of us. And the challenges that we face are as a globally interconnected civilization, ultimately to balance national interests and common interests across generations, with appreciation that next generation leaders, many of them are alive today and will be living in the 21st century. The context of the discussion today imagines into the future toward the fifth International Polar Year in 2032 to 2033. The International Polar Year itself is the oldest continuous climate research program created by humanity. It began in 1882 in Europe following the Little Ice Age, intentionally starting on a solar maximum, during a year of a solar maximum. The objectives of this year, planning forward to think in terms of large-scale polar processes and cryospheric processes, relevant United Nations decades, recognizing that we are in the beginning the International Decade of Action for Cryospheric Science. It's also the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development. All of these international decades began in 1961, following the International Geophysical Year, which was the third International Polar Year. An important feature of this International Polar Year and other International Polar Years going forward is next generation leadership, which is why it's so important to have the next generation leaders hosting this seminar. Relevant international science connections with the United Nations are important, such as the World Meteorological Organization, collections to data systems to characterize the changes, the patterns, the trends that are associated with our Earth system, particularly the ice in this context, and Earth system climate connections also. With this, it's an honor and it's a pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Alexandra Middleton, who will moderate the rest of the seminar. Thank you very much, and wishing everybody a happy, fun first World Day for Glaciers.
Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I need to take a little moment to, can you see, I think I can't open my presentation, and I'll just do it like this. Just a moment, excuse me. Little, yes. Does it work now? Can you? Yes. Dear friends, dear participants, welcome to this unique webinar when we celebrate and commemorate the first ever day for glaciers, together with the World Water Day. And if glaciers could speak, they would be screaming actually with urgency for action, because the loss of glacier ice is unprecedented. But also, this is the day when we recognize the interconnectedness of our world water cycles and the need to action. So when we think about glaciers, they are vital components of mountain ecosystems. They provide essential water resources for billions of people, and 2/3 of irrigated agriculture is dependent on them. So what is happening is that we are losing glaciers at unprecedented rate, and they contain 70% of all fresh water worldwide. According to the recent reports, we are to lose about 1/3 of all heritage glaciers by 2050s if no action is taken. What has been discussed here at UNESCO yesterday and today is the phenomenon that is called glacier peak water. This means that there will be an initial increase in water flow in rivers, producing temporary in water availability, which might result in momentarily economic prosperity for the downstream regions. But however, as glaciers shrink, this water supply diminishes, and it leads to a rapid decline and to significant reduction in downstream water resources and flows, which would lead to water security issues. So it's not just the environmental impact of the glaciers melting, but also the human impact of glacier loss, because billions of people depend on them, and the loss of these unique ecosystems that we are witnessing will contribute to water security crisis, to forced migration, and to even conflicts in the regions where the melt of glaciers is the largest. This will also disrupt agriculture in downstream communities. So we are witnessing a visible and irreversible sign of climate change through the loss of glaciers. And the impact is mostly felt by most vulnerable communities, which are in the mountains, in the downstream, and also by their small island developing states that are witnessing rising sea level due to their glacier melt. But amongst this urgency, we also see the hope and the path forward, because by sheer recognition of the importance of glaciers and establishing the world first year of glaciers within their year of glacier preservation, which would lead to the decade of action for cryospheric science, the world has recognized the importance of action and joint action amongst all the countries. And the topics that were discussed here yesterday and today at UNESCO headquarters are the state of our glaciers, the impact on water availability, food security, and energy security. And these are not just abstract concepts. These are the realities that are faced by communities around the world. And we need to know that solutions are within our reach. What has been discussed here yesterday and today is that above 1.5 centigrade temperature increase, many glaciers will lose most of their mass and disappear completely. So we need urgent and effective cutting of greenhouse gas emissions. And there are no quick fixes outside of this, because the failure to act will lead to long-term, dramatically negative and largely irreversible economic and social impacts, which could potentially cause dislocation and conflict in some regions. And even with such mitigation, some glaciers' loss is inevitable. And we also need urgent national adaptation plans, and as many glaciers lie within transboundary regions, we also need transboundary cooperation and global cooperation to save glaciers. So the time to act is now. We need to raise awareness, and we need to bridge the gap between science and policy to ensure that our decisions are based on the best available evidence. This event that we are hosting here today serves as a platform for dialogue and action, bringing together leaders, policymakers, scientists, and civil society. So let's live here today with a renewed sense of urgency and strengthened commitment to action. We should work together across borders and disciplines to protect these precious resources for ourselves and for generations to come. So the time to act is not tomorrow, it's not next year, it's now. And with this action lies our hope for a sustainable future. And with these words, I will pass the floor to Susanna Hannek, who is 2022-2023 president of the Association for Polar Early Career Scientists, an Arctic lead establishing the current UN Decade of Ocean Science, and is an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and science manager for Arctic Base Camp Foundation. Susanna will update us on events happening in New York. So the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Alexandra. So yes, welcome to New York, to the UN headquarters. And I'm not going to share slides because I'm actually going into the UN conference room in a moment. So I'm just going to speak quite quickly. But yes, I am here for as in my role as the Global Mountains Director for the International Cryospheric Climate Initiative and the co-chair for the Policy Task Force for the International Year of Glaciers Preservation. So we're having two meetings simultaneously. They're slightly different. And Alexandra's in Paris, and I'm at the headquarters in New York. So in about 90 minutes, we're starting the celebration here for the World Day for Glaciers and the pivotal World Water Day, which officially World Water Day is tomorrow, but we're honoring it today. And so we have two high-level events at the UN here. This event in New York is what they call high level. So that's focused on the top government level rather than the more institutional focus that's going on in Paris at the moment. Regardless, the purpose remains the same: to bring together leadership to address the urgent challenges of water security and climate change. This event here comprises high-level panels with heads of the UN and governments, scientific experts, collaborative dialogues on water security, and that's a theme that nicely bridges both days that we're honoring today. And also the launch of the World Water Development Report of 2025. So the goals of today are to develop awareness about the urgency of glacier retreat. What are the challenges? Too many people, including decision makers, still see glaciers as disconnected from growing natural disasters such as flooding or landslides, wildfires, or water insecurity. Another huge challenge is what Alexandra talked about with peak water. Governments and development agencies for example, are struggling to prepare for a future that's very different from what they're experiencing now. So now we might have too much flooding with rapid glacier melt and rain falling and precipitation falling as rain rather than snow. But we need to simultaneously prepare for a future with drought. And so what does that infrastructure look like? What do those decisions make? What does that economy look like? Indeed, this multi-hazard risk is one that is one of the very complicated matters of glacier loss around the world. I was at a government event a few months ago, for example, where they proposed not talking about glaciers anymore because they need to prioritize something and they're going to prioritize sea level rise. And it didn't occur to them that glacier melt was actually a huge cause of sea level rise. So, these disconnects are still ongoing. So that's one of our big things here as well. And with this year, we want to look at solutions as well today, especially surrounding water insecurity, mitigation, and adaptation. And finally, where I come in, specifically looking at the policy actions, again, focusing on the ongoing and forthcoming needs of water security. And although we have some intermediate meetings and work programs between now and then, our next big step for the International Year of Glaciers Preservation will be at the International Conference on Glaciers Preservation in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, at the end of May and into early June. This conference is going to focus on glacier melt, again, looking at the adaptation and resilience especially. We'll bring heads of state and key decision makers even to a glacier for a little field trip to give them the firsthand exposure, because many of them have never actually seen a glacier and don't really know what these are. And the outcomes of this conference are planned to include a declaration as well as a summary, which will outline the actions needed, new and renewed partnerships and initiatives and projects that will be implemented for future glacier preservation. And this will be presented at the UN General Assembly next September, right back here at the UN in New York City. So I am going to leave it at that. That's just a little bit of an outline of the year and our work here in New York. And again, with my focus on the policy task force. And thank you very much. And as I said, I'm going to be leaving in a couple of minutes to head in. So I apologize for not staying for the whole thing, but I'm grateful to have all of you here today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. That was an excellent contribution from New York. And next, we will go to our next speaker, who is Dr. Kamrul Hossain, who is an international law expert and is a research professor and the director for the Institute for Environmental and Minority Law at the Arctic Center of the University of Lapland. He is the chair of the University of the Arctic's Legal Research and Education, and he also leads the thematic network on Arctic law. His presentation will cover the third pole relevance in global water cycles. So the floor is yours, Kamrul.
You're muted, Tom.
You're muted.
You're muted. Kamrul, you're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was muted. So can you let me share my PowerPoint? So yeah, can you see my PowerPoint now?
No.
Yes, we can.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you, Alexandra, for introducing. And I'm very honored to be invited to this highly important discussion at this very first World Day for Glaciers. And I'm thankful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Kamrul Hossain. I'm a research professor at the Arctic Center of the University of Lapland. And in the context of today's discussion, I was set to talk about third pole relevance. And I think it is because I'm one of the members in the organizing team for the interpolar conference that we first organized in Kathmandu 2 years back, and we are now planning the second one in September this year, where we are kind of talking about or linking the Arctic and the third pole, and Cryosphere and glaciers are one of the main components in this important event that we are organizing. So first, as I will be talking about third pole relevance first, let me start by giving a short introduction to the third pole before I start speaking why we should care about the third pole. So in this presentation, actually, I don't have content. I just wanted to give you the impression of the third pole. Therefore, I just put some maps so that you can understand what a third pole is and what is the exact landscape that we are talking about. So third pole is often referred to as Hindu Kush Himalayan region, which comprises approximately 4,500 meter high Tibetan plateau from the northern part of South Asia to the mountain ranges of Central Asia, including Karakoram. Geographically, it spans approximately 4.2 million square kilometers across 9 countries. And it comprises the world's highest mountain peaks, including Mount Everest. What is important is that it has over 100,000 square kilometers of glaciers. Like other two poles, Arctic and Arctic and Antarctic, third pole has also significant permafrost and seasonal snow cover. And also third pole is called roof of the world, especially is Tibetan plateau, because of his high mountain regional lakes on the Tibetan plateau and all across the third pole region. The third pole glaciers feed into many major river systems in the region, as you can see from this map. Maybe I go to the other slide here, you can see more that how river systems flow in the third pole. And these river systems gets the water that are coming from third pole glaciers. And most importantly, the most important river systems are Ganges, Indus, Yangtze, and Mekong. As you can see, they were running all across the region. All in all, the region comprises the largest store of frozen water after Earth's North and South Pole, meaning after Arctic and the Antarctic. And because of the presence of this large body of water storage in frozen form, it is known as Asian Water Tower, on which, as it is already said, that a quarter of world's population dependent. So approximately 2 billion people in the region are dependent on the river systems that are flowing in the region for fresh water, for agriculture, and for the other local activities. In addition, as we were also discussing here, that the melt of glaciers has implication for people and living in the region. So this region has it's a densely populated region having over hundreds of different groups of indigenous and local people, and they have their own traditional activities related to their culture, which depends on the presence of the ecosystems that we are expecting in the third pole, which is on the change all the time. Now, why shall we care about the third pole? Why it is important? First of all, of course, we were discussing that the presence of glaciers, which is in other words called, cryospheric region. So the third pole is one of the cryospheric region in the world, and it contains approximately 46,000 glaciers in its mountain ranges, and many of them are at their tipping points. So as Alexandra were referring to, that we need to act actually to preserve the cryosphere. But we know that the climate change has a huge impact on the third pole region as well. So like in the Arctic, temperature rise in the third pole is also disproportionate compared to the global average. It is said that it is approximately 3 to 4 times faster also in the third pole region, like in the Arctic. The retreat of cryosphere is significant because of this temperature rise. Only on the Tibetan side of the third pole, it has been seen that more than 80% glaciers have been retreated since the 1950s, so 80%. So it's a huge retreat of glaciers on Tibetan Plateau. This retreat means more melting on a rapid scale with regional and global consequences. Concerning regional consequences, as we have been talking about, people, like 2 billion people, rely on the water supply system from this region. So regionally, the contributing to imbalance in the water supply system is one of the main concerns. The north-south distribution of water will be heavily destabilized because of cryosphere melt. Some regions in the third pole area, particularly the north, will experience a temporary surplus of water because of rapid melt, while the other southern region will face water shortages. And destabilization in this manner has already begun to raise concerns about water security in the region. And water insecurity in the region also leads to other concerns, for example, food insecurity, given that 90% of the water usage in this region is allocated to irrigation in region-wide agricultural farmlands. The modification of water supply system has impacted local ecological process and land use practices. So that does not only affect the people of the region, that affect people, the region's mixed biodiversity, which is very important in the third pole region, and also natural ecosystem. And it is also essential to mention that third pole biodiversity plays a crucial role in the formation and the maintenance of ice and snow. The mountain region forests have a unique role in making ice and snow in the region, so which is really unique, and that has to be considered seriously. Additionally, overall changes in the region and the imbalances, as I mentioned, in water flow frequently cause numerous natural disasters, such as floods, landslides, large-scale infrastructural damage, which contribute to human insecurities in many different ways. For example, internal and external displacement, livelihood transformation for many local and indigenous communities. Even for some ethnic and indigenous community, it is about existential threat because they lose their identity, they lose their culture because of the natural changes that are happening in the region. So why third pole? I mean, what kind of implication we see in addition to regional challenges? Why it is important for the global stabilization, global climate stabilization. As I said, the location of the third pole is in cryosphere region, which is notable. And the cryosphere, of course, plays a very crucial role in regulating global climate system. And how does cryosphere regulate global climate system? We know that cryosphere reflects sunlight into the atmosphere without having the heat absorbed on the Earth's surface, which is called albedo effect. The thawing of glaciers means absorbing more heat on Earth's ground, further accelerating the global warming. And melting cryosphere has interconnected and across regional impacts, which actually have planetary impacts as well. For example, thawing of the oceanic cryosphere, such as what we see in the Arctic, and the melting glaciers and ice sheets released into the ocean, which we see Arctic, Antarctic, and also in the third pole region, disrupt ocean currents. And the ocean currents distribute heat across the planet. And the alteration of ocean currents contributes to changes in atmospheric circulation patterns, which in turn affect weather patterns and also local and global climate shifts. As a result, the changes we see in other cryospheric regions, such as in the Arctic, can lead to more extreme weather for elsewhere. For example, contributing to atmospheric air circulation from the west to the east. So from the Arctic because of the changes in the Arctic, extreme weather of the Arctic has also contribution to the third pole region, for example, by having significantly impacting the monsoon in the third pole region, particularly in the Himalayas. The Tibetan Plateau acts as a heat source for the monsoon, and changes in its heating patterns can weaken or delay monsoon onset, reversing the patterns of local traditional and other sorts of activities that are being practiced by the people in the region, such as agriculture. Increased rainfall often leads to landslides and glacial lake outburst floods. So that is very common in the third pole region. Now, how shall we preserve the cryosphere in the region, including the cryosphere of the third pole, which is an important question, as Alexandra was mentioning, that we should act now. We cannot wait for tomorrow. But to act now, of course, we have to understand the dynamics of climate change cryosphere interaction, how cryosphere melting impact climate change, and at the same time, how climate change impact cryosphere. And overall, the consequences, as we see, is the acceleration of climate change unless and until we act in an effective and meaningful way. So for us, it is important to adopt international effort to understand the geological, atmospheric, and environmental processes and their interconnectedness, which affect climate change cryosphere interactions. On top of that, of course, we are talking a lot of the time about evidence-based knowledge, knowledge that are used by local and indigenous communities. So indigenous knowledge and other alternative systems of knowledge that has to be incorporated in the decision-making processes. So those people who are living on the region for thousands of years and they were experiencing the changes and then acting in response to those changes. So they have the important knowledge which we have to incorporate in our decision-making processes and to develop strategies and to also learn from them how to resiliently act in a manner which could allow us to protect or to preserve the cryosphere, at least in a sustainable way. So knowledge formation and translating knowledge into actions to promote strategies for enhancing climate change or climate action, including mitigation and adaptation process and adaptation strategies are important. And in addition to that, of course, we are nowadays talking a lot also about innovation, technological innovation to be incorporated in this process. For example, how to intervene the climate system, so which is in other words called geoengineering, how to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by using technology, or how to affect the solar radiation management. So even though the geoengineering or climate intervention projects are very controversial, but we have to very carefully think of the ways how to use other technological methods in this context, so that we can respond to climate change impacts. So that's it from my side. So I leave it here, and then I will be very happy to have the discussions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Kamarul, for your intervention. That's exactly what was discussed during the event yesterday and today, that we need global action and we need better understanding of the whole climate and hydrological cycle. Next, we go to our two speakers that will follow with their presentation. So it's Nicholas Barlato, who is currently completing his PhD at the International Arctic Research Center at University of Alaska Fairbanks. His research interest concerns how Western governance systems, politics, and institutions interact with forms of indigenous jurisprudence. And the second speaker is Dr. Zia Madani, who is an early career researcher in public international law focusing on the law of the sea. He is currently an assistant professor at the University of Tsukuba, Japan, and has been involved in legal and policy developments in polar law since 2013. He's also worked with UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. And jointly, they will discuss glaciers and their global significance, a legal and governance perspective. So please, if you need to, and also I would like to add to the audience, to the listeners, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So we'll try to answer them after the last presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Middleton. Hello and good day, everyone. Can you see my slides? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hello and good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Zia Madani, and I'm an assistant professor of international law at the Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Tsukuba. Together with my colleague, Nicolas Parlato, doctoral candidate, Arctic and Northern Studies at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I would like to begin this presentation by expressing our gratitude to the organizers of this timely and important event as an opportunity to celebrate the important first ever World Day for Glaciers. Within the next roughly 20 minutes, me and my colleague will be discussing glaciers and their global significance, legal and governance perspective. As was elaborately mentioned by the previous presenters, my colleagues here, glaciers have as vast reservoirs of solid water are not just frozen relics of Earth past, but they are dynamic components of the planet's climate system. They regulate global temperatures, they store fresh water and sustain ecosystems and communities worldwide. In the context of the Arctic, where the focus of this presentation would be, glaciers and sea ice are particularly critical because they influence ocean currents, they support biodiversity, and they provide water in its solid form that has shaped life for millennia in that region. However, as these glaciers thaw due to climate change, their transformation from solid to liquid water triggers some profound legal and governance challenges, especially in the case of the Arctic, which makes it timely for scholars in that field to start addressing those questions and those ambiguities. This brings us to the main focus of the first part of this presentation, which would be mine, and to the Article 2234 of the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea, which is a key starting point for understanding how actually the international law and international community addresses such shifts in the Arctic region. So Article 234 of the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea, which is also often called the Arctic Clause, grants the coastal states in that region, like Canada, Norway, Russia, and so forth, special rights to regulate the ice-covered areas within their exclusive economic zones, their EEZs, to prevent and reduce or control marine pollution. This article also recognizes the unique vulnerability of these regions where glaciers and sea ice dominate, and then they create exceptional hazards to navigation and fragile ecosystems that would require protection. And this protection is offered by this particular article of the UNCLOS. But as we witness today, and has been discussed already in this this webinar, as glaciers retreat and sea ice diminish, the scope of the Article 234 is exponentially being tested. Its applicability hinges on ice coverage for most of the year, raising questions about how it's relevant today as the Arctic continues to warm. So at this critical point is where law of the sea, particularly the Article 234, intersects with international water law, which is another branch of international law vis-a-vis the international law of the sea, which is a broader framework, legal framework addressing the management, governance, and protection of freshwater resources, including those that exist and locked in glaciers. So here we are facing with a kind of a very delicate distinction, yet very intertwined nature of these two different fields of international law, law of the sea and international water law. While international water law is distinct from law of the sea, it's deeply intertwined with it when it comes particularly in the Arctic. Law of the sea focuses on maritime jurisdiction and navigation, whereas international water law emphasizes the equitable use and conservation of transboundary water resources, principles that are enshrined in important international instruments such as the 1997 UN Water Courses Convention. In the Arctic, melting glaciers has been blurring these boundaries between these two fields of law for some time now, releasing fresh water into marine environments and affecting both terrestrial and oceanic systems. This interplay between these two fields is critical when we consider particularly the issue of water rights, as was also mentioned by my previous presenters, particularly for Arctic indigenous peoples who have relied on glaciers, rivers, and ice for sustenance, for their identity, for their culture since time immemorial. So at this point, we know glacier thaw challenges the Article 234 scope and applicability in the Arctic region. And this also strains synergy between two different fields of international law, that is international water law as well as international law of the sea. And it also, this threatens the indigenous water rights, as well as another important point, which was also touched on in the presentations before me, but I would like to go a little bit deeper into that, and that is a water, energy, and food security within a nexus context. So this brings us to this slide. When we talk about the Great Glaciers thaw, the main focus would be first and foremost on the water in terms of whether dealing with the field of international law of the sea or international water law. But within the context of WEF Nexus, understanding the interactions between water and food and energy resources and how the elements within the systems of each of these resources are interconnected and intertwined, we will understand that the security of these resources are also very interconnected. And these interconnected systems, elements, and security challenges, just as they are interconnected in governance and management approaches, which need to be the case. So thawing glaciers disrupt freshwater, while it has impact on hydropower generation and, of course, fisheries, as well as other types of food production, such as agricultural practices, which are dependent on the water sources for irrigation. So all these elements are being impacted. The security of each of these resources, because of this intertwined nature, will also be triggered and will also be compromised. So, and of course, that is why, importantly, Arctic indigenous peoples face exponentially water, energy, and food insecurity from climate and industrial pressures. And then, therefore, these challenges of WEF, particularly WEF insecurity in the Arctic, it becomes the case, as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide. It's one example of how the WEF systems work in the Arctic region. As you can see this as an example, the Yukon River Basin bordering Alaska in the US and Yukon and Canada. Where you have one single ecosystem, that is a Yukon River, you will have two different sets of legal frameworks governing different parts of one single ecosystem, so which has governed at governance levels. You have different institutions, you have different legal frameworks, different instruments, both at national levels, Canada and the US, also at the international levels, whether within the context of Arctic Council in Pan-Arctic context, or within a bilateral sets of instruments, agreements internationally together by Canada and the US. While what we have is a single ecosystem requiring a single nexus approach in governance and management levels. On the right-hand side of this slide, I would like to show you an example of what we mean with WEF insecurity in the Arctic. This is just an example of the Canadian Arctic divided by the Arctic regions in Canada. And you can see that how the WEF, water, energy, and food indices and the indicators show insecurity and the dramatic difference between not only the southern part of Canada, but as it's to its national average. And this brings me to my next slide, which, about speaking of the Indigenous peoples and their water rights and their water, energy, and food insecurity. We have international instruments dealing with the matter, with this matter, emphasizing on these rights, elaborating the rights of Indigenous people. This will be an issue which my colleague will be talking more in details. And this is a recent publications on the presentation that we're having today on WEF Nexus issue in the Arctic, as well as water justice in the Arctic. And I will stop here. Nicholas, over to you.
Thank you so much, Zia, and it's such an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues who I've had the very good fortune of working with for about a year now. We formed our group actually at Arctic Science Summit Week a year prior to right now, and currently Zia and I are here on the traditional homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples in northeastern Colorado, Boulder to be specific, and we're here for the International Conference on Arctic research planning, which is going to set the stage for the next 10 years of international Arctic research, which will include the International Polar Year that begins in 2032. So Zia and I are very much looking forward to the conversations and work that's happening here, and grateful that our colleagues are representing next generation interests in all these other venues around the world. So I am going to, Zia, when I need to have my slides change, I'm going to request it from you. I hope that's okay. So some researchers have come to believe that the loss of glaciers, along with the entire cryosphere, is already a foregone conclusion. The realistic, if gut-wrenching suggestion has prompted a range of responses in how glacial landscapes might be better managed and preserved. Some interventions involve what Anacona et al. Refer to as glacier protection laws, one of which has been enacted in Argentina, while others have been under deliberation in the countries of Chile and Kyrgyzstan. The authors observe, however, that while these laws can be valuable for preventing undue harms to glaciers from things like resource development, they also may impede interventions to prevent or mitigate glacial hazards, as Dr. Hossein described as being a serious concern in the third poll. The authors additionally warn that conservation measures for glaciers cannot stand in for broader climate adaptation strategies and carbon reduction, nationally and internationally. Next slide, please. So another side of the legal approach to glaciers, aside from glacier protection laws, as well as broader climate adaptation and mitigation strategies, is the development of rights of nature precedents. The most notable one in relation to glaciers took place in India, which built upon prior assertions of the legal personhood of two of India's sacred rivers through a ruling by the High Court of Uttarakhand in 2017, which stated that Himalayan glaciers, and particularly the Yamunotri Glacier and the ecosystem it supports, have the status of legal persons. While a potentially positive development, especially as this law gets actually enacted and used in court cases regarding the well-being of these ecosystems and glaciers, several authors have noted the strangeness of this ruling and its affordance of not just rights, but also legal duties and liabilities to the glaciers. Rights of nature regimes largely, though scattered worldwide, offer the possibility of legally challenging a wide range of actions on a stronger legal basis than that offered by standard environmental protection and conservation laws. And they have been valuable in affording indigenous communities legal stewardship and guardian status for ecosystems and other non-human entities. The issue remains, however, that the anthropogenic forces driving cryospheric decline are in fact transboundary, non-localized, and systemic, and require action at much larger planetary scales. Next slide, please. The intractability and momentum of climate change, characterizing what we think of as the Anthropocene boundary event, has not deterred, but rather has excited a range of proposals known collectively as climate interventions or geoengineering. This category includes interventions that are explicitly about buying more time for decarbonization, and others that imply sustained interventions over an indefinite period. Just recently, in January of this year, the Arctic Ice Project, which envisioned covering the Arctic Ocean with silica microspheres to compensate for lost sea ice albedo, folded. The project folded in light of unworkable research findings and extensive opposition from indigenous communities. However, a related initiative, the Bright Ice Project, has continued its work, conducting field tests of a brightening clay-based spray in the Himalayas last year. Because I do not have time here to address all the issues related to geoengineering of business incentives, the feasibility of scale, or the consent and collaboration with indigenous peoples, I want to limit my observations on geoengineering to one philosophical point. If the Earth is in fact a machine, a dynamic physical system, then these approaches might be appropriate. If, however, the Earth and all of its elements, including glaciers, are not a machine, but a network of social relations and sentient agents of change, then these approaches can be downright destructive. Final slide, please. The anthropologist Julie Cruikshank, the author of Do Glaciers Listen, grapples with the oral histories of First Nations and Inuit elders that suggest that glaciers observe people, that they respond to human actions, and they enforce more than human rules of conduct. When glacial embodiment, agency, and sentience are reduced to physical metrics, translated into data, Cruikshank writes, what disappears are the relationships through which entities in the world come into being, as well as the capacities that we might gain if we could actually learn to think with such stories. When the Ökjökull Glacier in Iceland died in 2019, a funeral was held. The people of Iceland recognized that a relative had been lost. So today, in commemorating the first World Day of Glaciers, it may behoove us to consider the thinking and the violence that led us here, into the midst of the Anthropocene, and whether our path forward lies not with techno-fixes, but with reclaiming our essential alliance with the Earth, which is the heritage of all human beings. So with that, I will conclude and thank you all for your time and attention, and looking forward to the conversation that follows.
Thank you so much, Nicholas and Zia, for your wonderful and thought-provoking presentation. Here in UNESCO headquarters, there has been also discussions about the paths forward, what should be done, because we need to have planned policy and policy interventions, socioeconomic vulnerability assessment, education and capacity building for the future, and also the need to incorporate local context and indigenous knowledge in the whole process that will follow this year of glacier preservation following into the decade of cryospheric science. Since we are running out of time, I would encourage all participants, all attendees to contact us on social media or via email if you have any questions. And now I will give the floor to Professor Paul Berkman to conclude this webinar.
I think the honor belongs to the next generation, and with the passion that has been shared by Zia, Nicholas, Kamrul, and yourself, Alexandra. Are there any questions that have been identified, Michael, that to address? I saw one participant that was just on the screen. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I saw him myself, but now this person has left the debate room, so I assume that on that side there will be no questions. But this discussion was exceptionally intriguing.
There is a question.
Now we have a hand. Let's hear the person. Yes, please.
Please, yes. So yes.
Yes, I have allowed to talk. Yeah.
Hello, please ask your question.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
At first, I would like to introduce myself. My name's Antoni Grabaczek, and I'm a student on the University of Warsaw in the political science. And my question is about the role of Arctic Council in case of taking care about glaciers near on the third pole. Near Pakistan, China, India, and Naples, and basically, I would like to give this question to Mr. Zia Madani. Is there some role for the Arctic countries and who basically lead the cooperation over Arctic issues?
Zia, please. We have a couple minutes, so if you brief.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I think on the question on the high mountain Asia, the third pole, Dr. Hossein should respond. But yeah, may I? Since I'm unmuted, I will respond to the question. But yes, of course, the Arctic Council, the Arctic states, the 8 Arctic states can, everything that can be done for glaciers is, of course, in the hands of, first and foremost, those 8 states, but particularly speaking in the context of international law, and of course those are the ones that can take actions at least at international levels. But the actions that can be implemented can be done through within a pan-Arctic context, within the Forum of Arctic Council as the main institution for their international cooperation in the Arctic. As well as that, the states also can enter into bilateral or multilateral cooperations through agreements or international treaties in order to devise approaches and frameworks in order to be able to preserve the Arctic glaciers or protect them or manage them in ways that are environmentally feasible. So yes, there are many things that can be done in various contexts, importantly through Arctic Council, but also through outside the Arctic Council. It is also possible through bilateral and multilateral actions by the Arctic states. I'll stop there.
Kamrul, please, in the remaining moments of this, I leave the final words to you in terms of the Himalayas and the impact on 2 billion people of the third pole, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first part of the question was addressed to me. About the glaciers protection for the third pole and the role of Arctic Council, this is kind of different because Arctic Council is the body, intergovernmental body of the 8 Arctic states. But as Zia already mentioned, that Arctic Council has been playing a very important role since its establishment concerning the climate change issue. For example, the main purpose of the Arctic Council was environmental protection and sustainable development in the Arctic. And one of the pioneering documents in the Arctic Council was Arctic Climate Impact Assessment that was released in 2004 or 2005 or between 2004 and 2005 that addressed that addressed concerns on sea ice melt and melting cryosphere and the impact in climatic shift, that kind of issues. But in the third pole Himalaya also there is an institution. It's an intergovernmental organization, unlike Arctic Council, because Arctic Council is not an international organization as per international law definition, but there is an organization in the third pole. It's called ICMOD, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. It's an intergovernmental organization. It's called a political body. They do a lot of research and produce science and monitoring on the melting of glaciers and cryospheres, thawing of cryospheres, and so they produce report and they produce knowledge on cryosphere melt and its impact on broader society, and also ask for intergovernmental cooperation and collaboration at the political level, to address the melt of glaciers and thawing of cryosphere in the region. So just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you very much, Kamrul. I note that we're a couple minutes over time, and I'm usually trying to be diligent in terms of timescale, but the host of this with the Global Health, Economics, and Sustainability Journal that kindly presented this webinar, Professor Michael Jakulovich. Michael, please, if you have a final comment.
Yes, before your conclusive remarks, Professor Berkman, I would like to ask or insinuate the very same issue surrounding the core of the ancient civilization arising around the third ice pole in South Asia, because here you see around 3/4 of the mankind live in close proximity to the ocean frontiers, to the sea coastal lines, on average only less than 100 kilometers away from the coastal line. So these rising sea levels are particularly likely to affect huge population-sized countries such as Nigeria, Pakistan, or Indonesia, or all three projected to rise to 400 million population at the end of the century, or Bangladesh as a cardinal example. So can this modern day and contemporary experience of adjusting architecture and the way of life and infrastructure and everything to the rising sea levels, for example, in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, be applied to, for example, Venice of Italy or Rio de Janeiro in Brazil? Are there any particular, let's say, a body of knowledge that will be usable, such as was the case with excellent Dutch tradition of architecture on water that was that spread throughout Asia and that was used in many regions to hold advancing water line. Could you please give some considerations or thoughts how modern day experience from one part of the world where it is much worse now can be applied to another remote region where the things are still yet to come, including the New York City itself?
Thank you, Michael. Alexander, with your oversight, would you like to respond to Michael's comment and conclude the webinar?
I think that was your function to conclude the webinar, so
Okay.
you might as well address Michael's question
Okay.
with future forward thinking that we all aspire to.
So one of the features of today's discussion is clearly the passion and insight and capacity of next generation leaders. It's not just those that are in power today. It's those that will be coming up into the future and leading the world across the 21st century. So with gratitude for the inspiration of this discussion to Alexandra, Zia, Nicholas, and Susanna, with the leadership of Dr. Kamrul Hossein in terms of his contributions, and certainly to Michael and team at the Global Health, Economics, and Sustainability Journal. To answer your question briefly, Michael, in a sense, you set up the discussion going forward across the World Water Day into the future. The World Water Day began in 1993, and it relates to water on Earth. Water is in different forms. Water is as solid as ice, and now we are celebrating the first World Day for glaciers. Water is a vapor. We see it in clouds. And we see on a planetary scale with satellites, certainly since the third International Polar Year, the International Geophysical Year, 1957-58, when satellites were first launched, the entire planet. And we can see how this water cycles. Water cycles in cities, it cycles in terms of health and economics, in terms of food. But the challenge we face as a world is one of understanding all of these interconnections. And it's not something simply that we can wave a magic wand. It's something that requires diligence and considerations, knowledge, discovery, passion. It requires a sense of commitment, a responsibility for all on Earth, all, not just humans, but the rocks, the people, the plants, the animals, all of it. We have responsibilities on a planetary scale. And that is the quest. That is the quest that organizations like UNESCO in New York, where Alexandra is, the United Nations in New York, think together as a globally interconnected civilization beyond the boundaries of individual nations. And this is the challenge we face, to address problems that are of a global nature. So with that, as concluding comments, and again, with deference to the leaders of this discussion, which are the next generation, I thank Alexandra, I thank Nicholas, I thank Zia and Susanna, as well as Kamrul and Michael for their important contributions, initiating a dialogue that will continue annually on the 21st of March each year to celebrate the World Day for Glaciers, along with the World Day for Water on the 22nd, as we move toward the 5th International Polar Year in 2032, which is part of the oldest continuous climate research program, which began in Europe in 1882 to 1883, following the Little Ice Age. So coming full circle, this dialogue that we face today is part of a discussion that's been going on for over a century and a half as the world together solves these planetary issues. Thank you very much, everybody, and wishing you a productive as well as enjoyable first World Day for Glaciers.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.